Have you ever hit your 30s and suddenly felt like money became this strange paradox in your life? On paper, you're earning more than you ever have, yet somehow your bank account still feels like a revolving door. One month, you feel like you're finally getting ahead, and the next, it's like your entire paycheck evaporates into daycare fees, medical bills, endless subscriptions, higher rent, weddings, emergencies, and unexpected expenses that seem to show up with terrifying consistency. If your 20s felt confusing, your 30s can feel like stepping into financial turbulence you never trained for. You're expected to be successful, stable, mature, and responsible while secretly wondering why money still feels so fragile. And here's the wild part. Nobody really warned you about this stage. Nobody told you that your 30s are where financial pressure, life expectations, and emotional weight collide at the exact same time. Nobody explained why people who look financially successful on the outside are often just as stressed, or even more stressed than you are on the inside. Nobody told you that building wealth in your 30s isn't just hard, it's psychologically exhausting. Today, we're going to talk about the truth behind that. Not the glamorous social media version of wealth. Not the motivational poster advice that says, just work harder and invest early. We're going to peel back the curtain on what actually happens in this decade, why it feels chaotic, what mistakes people make, and how many people silently sabotage their future without realizing it. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the subtle but powerful choices that separate people who eventually build wealth from those who stay trapped in financial survival mode. Because the truth is, wealth in your 30s isn't about how much you make, it's about how you survive the storm. My name is Jimmy, and in this video, we're going to unpack the real, unfiltered truth about building wealth in your 30s, the version nobody warned you about, but the version you absolutely need to hear. Let's start with something brutally honest. Your 30s are not the decade where everything finally clicks together financially. They are what many financial psychologists call the pressure decade, or as some researchers describe it, the messy middle. And that term exists for a reason. This is the stage of life where responsibilities don't stack one at a time, they arrive all at once. Career expectations increase. Social comparisons intensify. Family obligations grow. And the quiet fear of falling behind starts to follow you everywhere. You're expected to advance in your career even if you're still figuring out what you actually want to do with your life. You're expected to think about home ownership even if housing prices feel like a cruel joke. You're expected to save for retirement while also paying off student loans, helping family, or raising kids. Life in your 30s feels like balancing 10 financial priorities using 2 hands and half a paycheck. And when you struggle, you assume it's your fault. But it isn't. What most people never realize is that almost everyone in their 30s is financially overwhelmed in some shape or form, even the ones who look ahead of you. But because nobody openly talks about money struggles, the illusion forms that everyone else is thriving while you're falling behind. The truth is far more complicated and, honestly, far more human. Think about what's actually happening beneath the surface in this decade. Your income is rising, but so are your responsibilities. Medical costs increase. Groceries are higher. Housing is massively more expensive than when your parents were your age. If you have kids, childcare can feel like paying a second rent. If you don't have kids, your money gets pulled toward weddings, family obligations, and milestone events you're socially expected to support. Meanwhile, everything from travel to furniture to insurance costs more than anyone warned you about. And while all of this is happening, you're watching your peers post home renovation projects. Vacations, luxury strollers, engagement rings, upgraded cars, and aesthetic kitchens all polished through filters, angles, and highlight reels. And here's the twist. Many of them are stretched thin too, but financial stress rarely shows up on Instagram. Ever scroll through social media and wonder how everyone in their 30s seems so rich? Here's the secret. Most of them aren't. They're leveraged, financed, or quietly balancing debt. That comparison trap is one of the biggest psychological barriers to building real wealth. You mistake visibility for success, aesthetics for stability, and spending for progress. To actually get ahead in your 30s, you have to unlearn all three. This is also the decade where lifestyle inflation quietly creeps in. You work hard, you earn more, and it feels natural to upgrade your life. You've earned it, right? Restaurants, a newer car, a better apartment, more convenience purchases to deal with stress. None of these choices are wrong on their own, but they become dangerous when they happen unconsciously. Every lifestyle upgrade shrinks your financial breathing room and, eventually, erases the benefits of your higher income. And here's a truth nobody warns you about. Most people in their 30s don't get stuck because they're irresponsible. They get stuck because they unintentionally expand their lifestyle at the exact same pace their income grows. Their standard of living improves, but their stress level doesn't change. As a result, wealth doesn't build, just resets month after month. Let's zoom out and talk about something bigger than just budgeting or investing. Let's talk psychology. Your 30s are a time of identity conflict. You're no longer young enough to figure it out later, but you might not feel established enough to relax. You're expected to be mature and confident, while privately you're still wrestling with uncertainty and pressure. That emotional tension impacts your financial choices more than you realize. People overspend to cope. They delay investing because life feels too unpredictable. They avoid looking at their finances because the stress feels unbearable. And when life gets chaotic, money decisions become reactive instead of strategic. And yet, hidden inside all this chaos is the greatest opportunity of your entire financial life. Because your 30s are the turning point. This is the decade where small, strategic decisions start compounding into life-changing outcomes, even if they don't feel dramatic right away. The progress is quiet, slow, sometimes even invisible, but it is incredibly powerful. Understanding this is what separates those who build real wealth from those who stay stuck in a cycle of exhaustion and comparison. Here's a reality most people underestimate. In your 30s, time is still on your side, but now, your decisions finally have meaningful financial weight. You've earned enough to start building real momentum. Your career path is clearer, and your earning potential is growing faster than it did in your 20s. Compound growth starts, shifting from a theoretical idea to a practical reality. So even if you feel like you're behind, you are not late unless you decide to stop moving forward. Think about someone like Chris Pratt. He spent his early adulthood broke, working odd jobs, just trying to stay afloat. He didn't get wealthy in his 20s. His success didn't happen overnight. His big breakthroughs came later, built on a foundation laid during the years that didn't look successful at all. His story is a powerful reminder that progress often looks unimpressive right up until the results finally catch up. Real wealth is almost always built in seasons that don't feel glamorous. And for many, your 30s are exactly that season. This is also the decade where many people misunderstand what building wealth really means. They think it's about extreme sacrifice or rigid saving. But building wealth in your 30s isn't about depriving yourself. It's about being intentional. It's about choosing what aligns with your goals over what society pressures you to do. It's about understanding that every financial decision has two effects, one emotional and one mathematical. Sometimes the emotional benefit matters more, but only when you choose it consciously. And here is one of the most counterintuitive truths of all. It is absolutely possible to enjoy your life while building wealth. You just have to stop trying to keep up with lives that aren't actually yours. Focus on your own path, make intentional choices, and give yourself the grace to build slowly. The future, you will be grateful. This might mean choosing a smaller apartment to keep your financial flexibility. It could mean skipping the latest trends to spend money on things that actually improve your life, like rest, new experiences, quality time with loved ones, or learning a new skill. The most important thing to realize is that your financial journey is yours alone. It shouldn't look like anyone else's. Because the biggest wealth trap in your 30s isn't a lack of money yet as trying to live up to someone else's expectations. Now, let us talk about something else that S rarely said out loud. Setbacks in your 30s are completely normal. They don't mean you're failing. You'll have months where you save aggressively and feel like you're on top of the world. This isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're human. Real wealth isn't built in a straight, uninterrupted line upwards. It's built through resilience by navigating one disruption after another. The people who become financially secure aren't the ones who magically avoided all of life's chaos. In your 30s, wealth isn't measured by how perfect your progress looks. It's measured by your ability to keep moving forward, even when it feels like you're going nowhere. And this is where something truly profound starts to happen. It's about giving yourself mental peace. It's about choosing boring, steady consistency over risky shortcuts. Because simplicity compounds, but chaos doesn't. People who bought homes earlier, got help from their families, or landed a high-paying job right out of college. But their path is not your benchmark. Their story is not a script you have to follow. Building wealth is not a race against others. It's a personal relationship between your choices, your values, your time, and your patience. And if there's one truth about building wealth in your 30s that nobody tells you, it's this: you don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to move at the same speed as everyone else. And you definitely don't need to feel confident all the time. The real turning point comes when you stop asking, "Am I falling behind?" I start asking, "Am I moving in the right direction for me?" That shift in mindset, that quiet, steady commitment to your own forward motion, is what transforms your 30s from a decade of financial pressure into the decade where you build the foundation for your future. It doesn't happen loudly or dramatically. It happens powerfully, one small decision at a time. And one day, years from now, you'll look back on this time and realize something incredible. The moments when you felt unsure, overwhelmed, tired, or discouraged. Those were the exact moments your future wealth was silently being built. Not through perfection, but through your persistence. If this resonated with you, remember to stay consistent, stay grounded, and know that your story isn't running late, it's still unfolding. The decisions you're making today, even the small ones, are worth so much more than you realize. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.